Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for another one of our Charnwood Forest Geopark live public talks, bringing you all sorts of news from around the world associated with Charnwood Forest and our journey in the next few years. Just before we get going, a few bits of housekeeping. Firstly, if you're joining us live in the chat, we always love to hear where you're coming from and where you're joining us from today, whether you're in Charnwood Forest or around the world. Do pop where you're from in the chat. We'd love to know about that. Also, today, during the talk, if you think of any questions, please do put them in the chat, because at the end, we're going to be looking through the chat and putting all those those questions to the speaker. And also, a big thank you before we begin to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who fund nearly everything that we do at Charnwood Forest Geopark. So a big thank you to them and to all the lottery players for funding nearly everything we do at Charnwood Forest Geopark. We couldn't do it without you and your support through the Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme. Now I can see we've got people joining us from Colville and also from Woodhouse and near Leicester, Cropston and Anstey. So good representation from all around Charnwood Forest today. Also to say this talk will be available as a recording later, but of course it's always better to watch it live. My name's Jack Matthews. I'm your Geo-Heritage Officer at Charnwood Forest Geopark, and I'm also going to be your speaker tonight. So there won't be any overly verbose opening other than to say I'm your Geo-Heritage Officer, and my role at Charnwood Forest Geopark involves telling the story of our fantastic 600 million year old rocks, the fossils that are found in them, and making sure that they're looked after and their stories shared with not only the good people of Charnwood Forest, but hopefully, as you'll see from the talk ahead, with the good people all around the world. A reminder to ask your questions on the chat, and there will be also other opportunities to submit your questions. If you can't use the chat on Facebook, you can also text in your questions to 87980 794 827, and we will pick up those questions at the end. That's 07980 794 827. I can see we've also got some more friends in from Anstey and Holgates and Ulverscroft. You are most welcome. So for the next maybe 45 minutes, we'll see how I stick to time. We're going to talk about UNESCO Global Geoparks. What are they and what could it mean for Charnwood Forest? So in this talk, I'm going to go through the history of the Global Geopark movement, what they are. We're going to talk about what they try and do all around the world. I'm going to go through a bit of what Charnwood Forest is going through at the moment with its application process. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what this could mean for Charnwood Forest. And of course, there'll be plenty of time for your questions. So to start with, UNESCO. UNESCO is the education, science and cultural organization of the UN, and it is the only body within the UN family that has a mandate for the earth sciences, for geology and other associated sciences. Now, there's huge amounts that UNESCO does, and a lot of it people are unaware of what amazing work it's doing. But some of its most high-profile projects are its designations, its land-based designations that it can make. And probably the most prominent of those is the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. That was set up by an international convention within the auspices of UNESCO, and has been used to recognise areas of what's known as outstanding universal value, both within cultural heritage, that is built environments, but also in natural heritage, both areas of outstanding landscape, biodiversity, and also geodiversity. Geodiversity being the natural variability of all the wonderful things that are not alive, but still in nature, rocks, fossils, minerals, and other such things. Examples of UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the UK include the Jurassic Coast in Dorset and Devon, recognised for its important rocks representative of the Jurassic geological period, and also the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, fantastic site that is. And also on the non-natural site, we have sites like the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster in London, Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, and the Iron Bridge in Shropshire for its significance in the Industrial Revolution. But there are two other designations that UNESCO can give to a particular site around the world. One is the UNESCO Biosphere Reserves, and examples in the UK include the Isle of Wight and the Dyfi Estuary in Mid Wales. But there's also the UNESCO Global Geoparks. And of course, that's what you've all come to hear about tonight and what we're going to talk a little bit more on. So those UNESCO Global Geoparks, they actually have a much longer history than a lot of people realise. In 1991, there was a declaration from interested parties, scientists and conservationists and others, who came together and wrote the International Declaration on the Right of the Earth's Memory. This was all about geoconservation and the importance of recognising that it is our collective heritage of everyone on the planet, and that we all needed to work together on that. And a number of important international organisations and ideas were born from that meeting in 1991. And one of them was the idea, the concept of the geoparks. Now, through the 1990s, there were an increasing number of partnerships that brought these ideas together, until in the year 2000, several geoparks across Europe came together to form the European Geoparks Network. That was in the year 2000. Then in 2004, recognising particularly the number of geoparks that were starting to be formed in Europe and also in China, those geoparks all came together and created the Global Geoparks Network. Then in 2007, the Asia Pacific Geoparks Network was formed, and it was in 2015 that it formally became a UNESCO programme. UNESCO had been very heavily involved up until then, but in 2015, the General Conference of UNESCO, the kind of highest decision-making body where all the state parties, that is the member states, the countries that are members of UNESCO, their ambassadors met and decided to create the International Geoscience and Geoparks Programme. And within that, all of the geoparks that happened before, they became UNESCO Global Geopark. So the UNESCO affiliation, the badge, was added on to the geoparks in 2015. So the geoparks we have now, they've been under the UNESCO banner for about 11 years. Now, here's the only bit where I'll put a big chunk of text up because it's rather important, and I'll read this to you. UNESCO Global Geoparks must be single unified geographical areas where sites and landscapes of international geological significance are managed with a holistic concept of protection, education, research, and sustainable development. And UNESCO Global Geoparks should actively involve local communities. These are some of the rules and regulations of how a geopark should operate. That is to say, geoparks, unlike some of the other designations, must involve local communities. They should be grassroots. They should be formed by communities and organisations and not imposed by national governments from above. That is an absolute must of UNESCO Global Geoparks. And as you'll see, there must be single unified areas. That is to say, they must have a border that goes around everything. There can't be separate bits, separate islands that are designated that are brought together. That is unlike, for example, the World Heritage Sites, where you can bring separate sites that are not connected. One would be the beech forests of Europe, UNESCO World Heritage Site, or the bell towers, UNESCO World Heritage Site that's found across France and the Low Countries, disparate sites all collected together. No, a geopark must be one area. And as it says, it must be have international geological significance, and be managed with a holistic concept of protection, education, research, and sustainable development. So what does that look like? Well, to understand that a bit more, I'm going to take you through some of the geoparks that we have in Europe and show you some of the examples that they work on, so you can see a bit more about how a geopark works, not in the rules, but as it actually operates in the real world. So first, we're going to journey over to the wonderfully beautiful and well-staffed, wonderful people who work here at the Bakony Balaton UNESCO Global Geopark in Hungary. And you can see here one of the sites that's very important to them for their geological story, rich in fossils and very significant internationally for those fossils and what they tell us about a certain point in Earth history. But you can see here they're not just pointing towards their very important fossils and their very important rocks, but they are looking after them as well. These fantastic rocks in Bakony Balaton UNESCO Global Geopark, particularly at this outcrop we can see in the photograph, are very, very, very soft rocks. And also it's very easy for vegetation, grass, to grow over the top of them. So to stop that, they've built a very simple answer to that problem. They've built this wonderful cover. So geoparks must not only be places of internationally significant geology, you've also got to show that you're looking after those rocks. And here's a wonderful example from our friends in Hungary. Geoparks, though, are not just about geology and geodiversity. They should also celebrate the other things that make their region special. And so here in Austria, in the Sterische Eisenwurzen Natur- und Geopark in Austria, here we can see an example of how they're celebrating their biodiversity, and in this case, the fantastic heritage of orchards that they have there, still prominently in their Geopark brand, still a very important part of their story, but not just about the geology. You must be celebrating as a geopark all the things that make your region special. Next, we'll go over to Portugal for another example of celebrating non-geological heritage. Here we are in the Algarvensis UNESCO Global Geopark, only declared a few days ago. Last Thursday, they got their UNESCO status, so big congratulations to Algarvensis in Portugal. And here you can see one of the menhirs, these prehistoric standing stones. These are archaeological remains, historic remains, just north of the beautiful ancient city of Silves in southern Portugal. And again, a key part of the story of the Algarvensis Geopark region. And you can go on a fantastic tour there. So not just about the rocks, also about the history. And a good geopark brings all of those stories together. It doesn't keep them siloed. It doesn't talk about rocks and biodiversity and also some cultural heritage. It finds the connections and celebrates those. And a fantastic example from the United Kingdom is the Black Country UNESCO Global Geopark, bringing together the boroughs of Dudley and Wolverhampton and Wensfield and Walsall. Fantastic place. And where better to see geology and cultural heritage and biodiversity all brought together than at the Dudley Canal Trust, where you can go on a barge, a fantastic bit of the industrial heritage of that region, through the canal that is tunneled under the Silurian rocks there, and see a fantastic and engaging light show and video that will tell you not only why those rocks are so important, but how those rocks shaped the communities and potentially even laid the foundations for some very important music indeed. So what a fantastic way to bring all of those things together. That's a great example from the Black Country Geopark in the West Midlands of England. Now, it's also, you have to show as a geopark that you've not only got special rocks and they sit alongside beautiful biodiversity and great cultural heritage, you have to show that they are being used for the betterment of your local communities, to support the people who actually live in the geopark. And one of the best ways to do that, and the main way that is often seen in UNESCO Global Geoparks, is through sustainable tourism. UNESCO Global Geoparks are not about turning a region into a theme park and piling lots and lots of people in. It's about knowing the capacity of that region and working with local communities in partnership to make sure that we can have sustainable visitation, hospitality, and tourism, and that the benefit of that comes into those local communities for the support of new jobs and stronger local economies. It's also important to point out that if you've got more people coming in a sustainable way, you're going to have more people paying tax, and that will help you fund future work in the geopark. So a great example of sustainable tourism is at the Morn Gully and Strangford UNESCO Global Geopark in Northern Ireland, where you can see here they have a number of fantastic e-bike rental operators, and you can zoom around the fantastic trails specifically designed for mountain biking and e-bikes all around the geopark, exploring the wonderful rocks and scenery they have in their geopark in a new and fantastic way. Not only sustainable because it's an e-bike, but also what a great way to travel around, keeping traffic off the roads. What a fantastic example. You must also use all of your fantastic stories to support education as well, getting into schools, but also inviting schools in from outside the geopark to learn about the stories that can only be told in your geopark. And a wonderful example here is here's a class from the Karavanken UNESCO Global Geopark, which sits across the border between Slovenia and Austria. It's one of a small number of transboundary UNESCO Global Geoparks in the world. And one of the ways that they have brought together their communities across that boundary is to have a geopark song. So the children here are singing the geopark song. This is just to say that if anyone listening now would like to take up the baton of composing a geopark song for Charnwood Forest, and we would very much like to hear from you. I'm sure there's some of you who are joining us here today who have fantastic musical talents, and we would love to learn from our dear colleagues at Karavanken and have our own geopark song. This is a good example, ladies and gentlemen, of why it's a good idea to be part of the Global Geopark Network, because you can look at the other geoparks all around the world and learn from them and look at the great ideas and bring them back to your geopark. I do hope one day we have a geopark song in Charnwood Forest. You've got to share your story not only in the classroom, but all around the world and the visitors who are coming in. And here's a lovely visitor centre that they have built in the Buk-Videk or Buk region UNESCO Global Geopark in Hungary near Miskolc. It's a fantastic interactive visitor centre, bringing to life their story, not only their geology, but how that geology has shaped their forests. Buk meaning beech tree in Hungarian, so the big beech forest they have in that region, but also other aspects like the water. This region is known for its caves and its springs, and that's all been shaped by the geology. So they bring that all together with a fantastic visitor centre. Maybe one day in Charnwood Forest, we too will have a fantastic visitor centre like they do in Buk. It's also about supporting local businesses. We've already touched on that in some ways through the sustainable tourism section, but there are many, many ways to do that. And a geopark should be working with many of the local businesses. Here's a lovely example, a very tasty example from the Cessia Valgrande UNESCO Global Geopark in northern Italy, where we're visiting here on the photograph a picture of a group visiting a vineyard, and they're being told all about the fantastic wine. Of course, being in a geopark, they're being told a little bit about the influence that the geology has had on that wine. But hopefully through the geopark promoting that geological connection to the wine, a few more people go to the vineyard, buy a few more bottles, and the local economy is strengthened, particularly for those small local businesses. Geology is not all wonderful fossils and fantastic rocks. We have to recognize that there are many hazards around the world that are geological in origin too, and a good geopark should be recognizing those geohazards, whether they are in the geopark or elsewhere, and helping people and communities to understand and prepare for that. A good example is here in the photograph, the Reykjanes UNESCO Global Geopark in Iceland, very well known for its eruptions that have been going on in the past few years. This is not the geopark with the big volcano that shut the air travel in Europe, but rather the one that in recent years has had the basaltic, oozy lava eruptions. And here you can see in the photograph a valley that's been filled in by some of those lava flows. The communities of Reykjanes are very familiar with geohazards. There are communities that have had to be evacuated, and people can no longer live in their homes because of these volcanic risks. And it's a key part of the story that the geopark works on, and also supporting first responders to be able to cope with those geohazards. So a geopark, whether we have the geohazards in our geopark or not, will definitely be talking about geohazards and informing people about how to prepare and then be more resilient when these geohazards strike. Now, at the moment, the number of geoparks has just changed because the UNESCO Executive Board met just last week, and on Thursday it declared several new UNESCO Global Geoparks. I believe it was 12. So the total number of UNESCO Global Geoparks is now 241 in 51 countries. If we make that a little bit bigger for you, you can see that there are a rather large number of UNESCO Global Geoparks in Europe, fairly well spread around Europe, and also in China, particularly in Eastern China. Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, also countries that have lots of UNESCO Global Geoparks. There's a few in South America, Latin America, none in the Caribbean at the moment, a few in Mexico, and 5 in Canada. And since last week, there are now 3 in Africa. There were 2 for a while, and Tunisia got their first UNESCO Global Geopark. You can see there's also one down in New Zealand, the Waitaki Whitestone UNESCO Global Geopark. So they are not equally distributed around the world, but there's lots of people in many different countries and in UNESCO and in the Global Geopark Network who are working very hard to support countries who don't have a geopark yet and for them to get there first. And once you've got your first, hopefully you will find it much easier to get your second, third and fourth. So we are hoping at Charnwood Forest to join this fantastic club. And you can see at the moment, if we were able to zoom in on this image and go into the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, you would notice that there aren't many, or indeed there are none in the East Midlands and there are none in the Southeast. So at the moment, there's a kind of big chunk of England in particular that doesn't have any UNESCO Global Geoparks. Well, we're going to help plug that gap. So just a reminder, and I know many of you who are joining us today are familiar with where the boundaries are for our geopark. Our geopark is 158 square kilometres that sits between the city of Leicester, the town of Loughborough, and the former coal mining communities of Thringston, Colville, and others on the western edge. It is very important for its geology, but also its biodiversity and cultural heritage. And this is the area that we are seeking to get designated a UNESCO Global Geopark. This boundary is based on a previous boundary. In fact, it's not based on, it is exactly the boundary of the Charnwood Forest Regional Park, which was set up by a number of organisations many years ago who came together recognising that Charnwood Forest, crossing the boundary as it does between Charnwood Borough, Hinckley and Bosworth Borough and North West Leicestershire District Councils, that they and the County Council and many other organisations like the Wildlife Trust and the National Forest needed to work together to coordinate to celebrate and conserve this fantastic place. So that's where our boundary comes from. It's the Charnwood Forest Regional Park, but we're now hoping to turn it into a global geopark. Sorry, I turned around there. It's just started raining here. Now, the Charnwood Forest Partnership, we are not creating this geopark from scratch. We are standing on the shoulders of many organisations, including those on the screen and many more, who have been working together to, as I say, conserve and celebrate Charnwood Forest for many, many years. And all of this work has been radically accelerated over the past 5 years, thanks to a major grant, more than £3 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to what we call the Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme. So again, I won't tire of thanking the National Lottery, even for the egotistical reason that they pay my salary. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All of this would not be possible without the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and I wouldn't have a job. Now, our geodiversity, our internationally significant geology, this is our Precambrian fossils, more specifically than Precambrian, our Ediacaran fossils. They're about 560 million years old, and they represent some of the oldest animal life ever discovered on the planet. Charnwood Forest is the place where the world realized that fossils could exist in the Precambrian. So it's very, very important, not only for paleontology, but the broader field of geology. This will be the hook that we hang our international significance on. And you can see a wonderful reconstruction on the screen there of our fossil community and what it might have looked like some 560 million years ago at the bottom of the sea. That reconstruction has been made by the fantastic Czech paleo artist Martin Lysets, and we're just going to see a little video because we've recently got some fantastic 3D animations of what these organisms look like. And the first I'm going to show you is Charnia, which was the first of our fossils to be discovered in the late 1950s. Here's a 3D reconstruction also made by the brilliant Martin Lysets. Now, that was Charnia. A few decades after the discovery of Charnia, another fossil was discovered. Many species have now been discovered, but I'm going to show you one more. This is Bragatia. You'll be shocked and alarmed to learn that Bragatia was found in Bradgate Park. What a fantastic thing to have a fossil that's named after one of our wonderful, beautiful sites. Bragatia lymphadensis, lymphadensis being the species name for anyone in the audience who's from Newtown, Linford. Here's Bragatia. Now, those are two of our fossils, new ones being found, it seems, every few years. So it's not just about our science standing still. Many fantastic fossils have been found here and will be found in the future, and the Geopark will be celebrating those. So that's our internationally significant geology, but we're going to be, of course, bringing that together with the other aspects that make Charnwood Forest special too. Now, how do we do this? How do we go forward? Well, first, you've got to have people working on all of the areas I talked about before. You've got to have people working to celebrate your heritage, to help bring in volunteers, to have an education program, to celebrate the biodiversity and the cultural heritage, and to manage all the projects too. So here are the 6 people who have been working on Charnwood Forest Geopark, funded by the National Lottery for the past few years. And we are the ones who've been deploying and doing all of that, deploying those projects. If you'd like to find out more about what we're working on, you can find more at charnwoodforest.org. where there's details about all the projects we're working on. You can also sign up to our fantastic newsletter, and then once a month we'll send you an email with some of the news of what we've been doing, what's coming up, and events that you can also get involved in. Now, how does it work with an application? Let's imagine you've got your internationally significant geology, you've had an education program, you go into schools, you're doing fantastic work with new interpretation, you've got a volunteering program, you're looking after your rocks and your fossils, you've started to support the visitor economy and tourism, you're bringing local businesses together to celebrate each other, you're doing all of those things. But how do you still turn it into a geopark? Well, now we'll go through a little bit about how the application works. So firstly, you need to write a dossier, an application dossier. That's 50 pages long, and that is accompanied by lots of appendices. So here are some of the front covers of the documents that we've sent to UNESCO. So we've got Annex 2, which is going to talk all about why your geology is so important. That's the statement of why your geology is so important. You're also going to have a big bibliography in Annex 6 of all the scientific publications that have ever been written about your area. And luckily for Charnwood Forest, that's hundreds and hundreds of people who have been publishing on the geology and other scientific aspects of Charnwood Forest for, in our case, nearly 200 years. So we stand on the shoulders of scientific giants when we push forward the geology of Charnwood Forest. But not all the documents in our case are written by Charnwood Forest. It's a big job to bring those together. And one example, we have to have a letter from, in our case, we got it from Natural England, who are the statutory body for nature conservation in England. And we needed a little note from them, a little letter from them, because we are less than 100 kilometers from another UNESCO Global Geopark, not quite neighbors in the Black Country UNESCO Global Geopark. And so there's a rule that if you're close enough, less than 100 kilometers from another geopark, you have to have an independent report that says and proves that you are geologically different from that one. This is to stop you having several geoparks all right next to each other who are all celebrating exactly the same geology. Now, luckily for us, Black Country Geopark is all about the Silurian and the Carboniferous, you know, the Silurian used for cement, the Carboniferous, the coal, and how all of those minerals and rocks were brought together to create the Industrial Revolution, to be the foundation for the Industrial Revolution. Now, that's got nothing to do with the geology of Charnwood Forest. We are in a country in the UK where the geology changes quite rapidly as you move along. So it's very easy for our friends at Natural England to write a report and say, the rocks of Charnwood Forest are nothing like the Black Country. But that's very important for us. There are, of course, many other documents that are in our application. And there's also a ginormous map that we have to give them, which shows our boundary and the designated sites, the scheduled monuments and the triple SIs and the national nature reserves and where our geosites are and all of those things. So lots and lots of work. And what you do is you submit your dossier in November. Every year, there is one chance to apply and the deadline is November. So you submit your documents in November. What happens then? Well, before we get into what happens then, I've jumped ahead of myself. The other thing you can include in your application is a folder full of endorsements. Now, of course, you'll include endorsements from your local politicians, local government, important local organisations like, in our case, the councils, the Wildlife Trust, the National Forest, all essential operators in our region and key foundational partners, not only in the geopark, but in the partnerships that are themselves the bedrock of the geopark. But you can also sprinkle a few other endorsements in, and in our case, we are very proud to have none other than Sir David Attenborough himself, who wrote us a very kind letter to support the Geopark application. in which he says Charnwood Forest would make an excellent addition to the international family of UNESCO Global Geoparks. So a big thank you to Sir David, and we will be especially looking forward to and celebrating your 100th birthday, which is at the end of next week. The Geopark may have some special celebration to make on that day. You'll just have to follow along on our emails and on social media to find out what we're doing to celebrate Sir David's birthday. But thank you to Sir David for showing his support to Charnwood Forest, a region with which he has had a connection all the way back to his schoolboy days. Now, the process carries on. You overwhelm them with your fantastic endorsements, and then everything goes quiet. So you don't hear much from UNESCO after November. They do a few checks of your documents. If they want a few things changing or putting in a different format, they might speak to you. But other than that, you don't hear much. And what happens around about in this year, it started at the end of March, the wonderfully named Intergovernmental Check. And this is when the 190 or so governments that are members of UNESCO have a chance to have a quick look at your application. They all get sent a 2-page summary of your geopark, and then they, if they want, can make a comment. Now, it should be said that the vast majority of the geopark application process is overseen by experts, by scientists and experts in conservation and management and local government and things like that. But this is the opportunity when the governments really have their say. And we should say, most of the time, they don't say anything, which is fine. It makes it very, very easy. If we were to say, what were the occasions when the intergovernmental check might be used at the moment? It might be, for example, if a geopark were proposed in a region that was disputed territory. But I don't believe Charnwood Forest is disputed territory, so I don't think we'll have a problem here. So we are currently in this process that I'm whisking you through. We are in, at this very moment, the period of the intergovernmental check. This year, the intergovernmental check started on the end of March, and it goes on for 3 months. So the intergovernmental check will end at the end of June. And if I make this a little bit bigger, you can see the names of some of the geoparks who have submitted their application in November 2025, like us, and are going forward for their evaluation this year. So if you know where to look, this is a public, not many people have this list, but if you know where to look online on the UNESCO website, you can find this. It is publicly available. So, for example, we have a proposed geopark, Kaybox in Canada. That is from the west coast of Newfoundland. There are new aspiring geoparks submitting for their evaluation in Africa, from Ethiopia, from Kenya, and from Namibia. And there are 2 from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. There is us, and there is also Cross-Channel Transmanche, which is a joint application between the UK and France. That is a very exciting application. They've worked very hard on their bid down in Kent and in the Pays de Calais, linking together the chalky foundation of both the Cliffs of Dover and Kent behind it, the channel itself, and France. So those are some of the applications that are going forward this year, and we're very proud that we are on that list. It feels very official once the intergovernmental check begins and that document gets published, even though it's to no fanfare at all, and not many people will have probably read that because it's in a kind of archive at the back of the UNESCO website. But an important moment for us as we take our steps forward. So, also, either happening round about now or potentially, if it hasn't already begun, in the next few weeks to months, our Annex 2, that's the one where we have outlined in great detail why the rocks of Charnwood Forest are so important, and importantly, how we are looking after them. So we've detailed what our rocks are, the geological history, and in our case, spent a lot of time talking about the fabulous pre-Cambrian fossils that can be found there. I should say, I'm not dwelling too much tonight on our fantastic geology. If you want to know more about that, you should go onto our YouTube channel and watch some of the previous speakers who we've had on and talked about our geology. Particularly, we had Professor Duncan McIlroy of Memorial University, who came to talk to us about a new fossil discovery from Charnwood Forest and from Newfoundland. And that is very much included in our story. So if you want to know more about our fossils and our rocks, look on our website and on our YouTube channel. But Annex 2 is either at the moment or very soon going to be flying around the world via the International Union for Geological Sciences. So they have some experts who will be looking at our Annex 2. It's what's called a desktop exercise. So unfortunately, those experts won't get to visit us, but they'll be sent a copy of our annex, and they will read through it all, and they will write a very quick, simple report that simply asks the question, does Charnwood Forest have internationally significant geology? Have we demonstrated that? And it is for those 5 experts, then brought together through a committee in the IUGS, the International Union of Geological Sciences. They will decide, do we have the internationally significant geology? Hopefully I'm not resting on my laurels, but I think we've got the internationally significant geology locked in. I think we're okay on that one, with our fossils being some of the oldest animals in the world. Then come the evaluators. So we are now expecting our evaluators to come sometime in probably, everything's caveated here, probably July or early August. We will have 2 evaluators, and you can see here me being an evaluator in other places. So there's always 2 evaluators, a junior evaluator, that is someone who has done fewer than 6 evaluations before, and a senior evaluator, someone who's done more than 6. There's always 2, and they're not necessarily geologists. They may have skills in all sorts of areas. They may have skills in public administration, in tourism, in sustainable development. They might be an academic of some kind. They could be involved in conservation, any of the topics in which a geopark works. And UNESCO will often appoint the evaluators to have complementary skills. So 2 evaluators will be appointed, and they will come to Charnwood Forest probably for 4 nights, would be a typical amount of time. And they'll spend those 5 days with us, and they won't be too concerned about the internationally significant geology. That job is for the IUGS evaluators. Our evaluators will be coming to see whether we're doing all of the other things. Are we telling the story in an easily accessible and understandable way? Is it clear that when you're in Charnwood Forest, you're also in a geopark? Is the geopark visible, or is it just simply a website? If you've just got a website, not good enough. You must, of course, have a website and be using social media to promote your geopark. They're going to be seeing what we've done in education, biodiversity, cultural heritage, working with local communities and businesses and partnerships, sustainable tourism, and all of these things. So it's going to be lots of visits, lots of shaking of hands, lots of photographs, and we will hope to impress upon them what makes Charnwood Forest special, not just its rocks, but also the wonderful people that live here and everything they do every day to celebrate our region. So that's probably going to happen sometime in July or early August, and they will go away and they will write a 25-page report here for a revalidation, because all geoparks are revalidated every 4 years, or an evaluation report in our case, because it will be the first time, and that will be sent to the UNESCO Global Geopark Council with a recommendation. Now, the evaluators are not going to tell us what they are recommending. So they can recommend one of 3 things. They can recommend a green card, that is to say, fantastic. Welcome to the Global Geopark family and the UNESCO Global Geopark status. They can make that recommendation, green card. They can say yellow card, which is nearly there, but needs some more work before you get the status, in which case you'll have 2 years, up to 2 years, to make those changes or additions, write a report, and if they're happy, you'll get your Geopark status. Or red card, not ready to be considered, start the application process. Again, you'll get lots of feedback, of course, but it's really saying you're really not anywhere near there yet. There's lots more work to be done. Fingers crossed for us, it will be green card. But who knows? Your evaluators cannot tell you at the time. They'll write their report between the two of them and submit it to the Global Geopark Council, which will then meet probably sometime in September or October. We're expecting September. The Global Geopark Council will meet. This is experts from all around the world. They will read the report of the evaluators and they will use that to come to their own conclusion. They nearly always agree with the evaluators, but sometimes they might have good reason to go with a different recommendation. So they will then vote. We will know by that time how they voted as a council and what they're recommending, but nothing becomes official at that point. So in our timeline, with our evaluation happening this year, we're expecting that Global Geopark Council meeting to happen in September of this year. The recommendation of the council, you can see, ladies and gentlemen, there's lots of councils and committees here, then goes to the UNESCO Executive Board, which we expect will meet in April, probably, of next year. And this is the moment when it will all be official. And that is indeed the meeting that happened last week, where Algarvensis and 11 other geoparks got their UNESCO status. So that is the process we're going through at the moment. And of course, during that time, we also have to continue our very important work funded by the National Lottery, all the other projects we're doing. So there's lots to do, but that's the process we are on. So if all goes well, we'll be looking at April 2027 to have your glass of bubbly or whatever other beverage of choice you wish to celebrate our new UNESCO status. Of course, being the Geopark, we strongly recommend a glass of bubbly of English sparkling wine from the Rothley Wine Estate, which is one of our geo partners. You can find out more on the charnwoodforest.org website. Now, what does this mean for Charnwood Forest? What could it all mean? It's important to note that the UNESCO designation doesn't change the law. Nothing will change on the day that your UNESCO Global Geopark is declared. So you'll still be able to do the things that you could do the day before. It also doesn't mean you get any automatic funding. There's no central pot from UNESCO that you'll suddenly be eligible for, and there's no UK government pot either. However, you will become eligible to a very occasional funds. So every so often there might be a funding proposal through UNESCO that only geoparks or designated areas can apply for. And there's a number of geoparks and other UNESCO designated sites that are currently working on projects in the UK that's funded by a lottery supported project through the UK's National Commission. So no automatic funding as a geopark, but you already as a geopark will get to apply into pots that only you can access. However, it will make funding the work that we're doing at the moment into the future easier. The UNESCO brand is very well known all around the world. It is a badge of quality. People want to visit it and people want to be involved with it. And because of that, people will reach out and want to be involving the geopark in their projects, which will hopefully bring in some funding to Charnwood Forest. But also, when Charnwood Forest applies to other funding to support some of our projects and proposals, grant committees might look on it just that bit more fondly because they'll want their organisation to be associated with the UNESCO Global Geopark brand and everything that involves. So it can help you unlock funding that will support things like conservation and education and sustainable tourism into the future. We also believe that having this status is going to help us conserve Charnwood Forest in a better way. Now, it's important to stress it's not going to change the law. Nothing in the law will change about Charnwood Forest, but Charnwood Forest will be much more high profile when it has this international designation. I'm sure that will be in the minds of people when they're making decisions about Charnwood Forest, but also it should be in the minds of everyone in Charnwood Forest, the East Midlands and the world more broadly. We believe at Charnwood Forest that you can't care for what you don't understand. And through the Geopark message and project and proposal, we're helping more people to realise why Charnwood Forest is so special. It's only 8% of the Shire County of Leicestershire, but it's got 50% of the county's nationally designated natural sites. We know, and I'm sure many people who are watching this know, why Charnwood Forest is so special. But through the UNESCO status, hopefully we can make many, many more people understand why it's special. And then they'll be even more likely to take care of it. I think it's also going to be good for well-being and for health. Hopefully, if more people know about Charnwood Forest, then more people might leave their cars at home and go on a fantastic walk. If only more people knew how beautiful this landscape is, we think more people would go on a lovely walk through it, and that's going to be a good thing for them. It's going to be a good thing for education, both because we'll hopefully, with the UNESCO status, be able to do more in our local schools and support them, and we can bring even more prominence to the fantastic educational resources that our education officers have worked on over the past few years, helping to share the rich heritage, geological, biodiversity and history of Charnwood Forest with all our local schools. As I've already talked about, I think it's going to be very useful for funding, in drawing more funding in and making a geopark that then can be a bit self-reliant, creating its own funding, using that badge, that prominence that's going to bring more funders and more people into Charnwood Forest. And it will mean that there in the bottom left, celebration, a fantastic opportunity to celebrate the geopark and all the secondary benefits that will come from that. So, will Charnwood Forest become a UNESCO Global Geopark? Well, partly it's going to be down to our evaluators and what they think, but it's also going to be down to you as well. Many of you, I'm sure, are involved in the geopark or might want to be. Those evaluators might want to meet you and have a chat about why Charnwood Forest is important to you and hear a bit more about what the geopark's been doing. But you might be involved in a local group that could partner with the geopark. Perhaps there's a project that we could support you with, or many, many other ways. So if there's some way that we can work together, that's exactly what a geopark would be doing, and we would love to hear from you. As I've said before, there's lots more information on our website. I will pop up a little QR code in the top left where you can find out more at charnwoodforest.org. Sign up to our newsletter. But at that point, we'll move to some questions. So a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat and I will try and address as many of those as possible. I can see we've got some in already, and just while I'm collating some of those questions, I will also say that we are currently hosted by the National Forest Company. Huge thanks to the National Forest for hosting the Geopark team. The National Forest is a charity in its own right, and obviously we're doing charitable work on the Geopark project within it as well. The Geopark is going to be a charity in the next month or so, and if you would like to donate to help support any of the things we do, we are entirely reliant on our funding through donations and the lottery fund. You can donate using the QR code there on screen now, or you can find out more about the donations on our website.